So earlier this week I watched Bad Boys Ride or Die with my family, and to be completely honest with you guys, it was a pretty good movie, to the point that I actually went looking for its soundtrack once it was finished, which is something that I rarely do, especially for films that we just decide to put on. It's just a fun movie that you can not only turn your brain off and watch, but get a somewhat thought-provoking plot if your brain isn't on autopilot. But during the film, I kept wondering to myself if Skylands has a criminal underworld similar to the one that we see in the movie. So I decided to do some digging, and I think I found something even better. Many of the Skylanders within the organization actually used to be criminals or deal with crime to a degree, and I'm not talking about some of the villains we see in Trap Team that would go on to be heroes. No. We're talking about Skylanders who have criminal histories before the first game itself. Crime clearly doesn't discriminate in Skylands with the varied amount of Skylanders involved with it. So today, we're going to hunt down some of these former criminals and dig through their past to see what we can find. So with that out the way, let's get started.
Go ahead, snake my day.
Rattleshake is pretty much the biggest reason why I wanted to make this video, due to the fact that I originally thought that he was a bounty hunter. But the more I dug into him, the more I realized how interesting he is outside of Skylands. Rattleshake was originally supposed to be a zombie cowboy with detachable legs and phantom pistols, and even his swap ability was different, originally being a dig ability instead of a bounce ability. Which kinda makes sense, but kinda doesn't as well. Zombies are only really known for digging up out of their graves and not down into them, but anyways. He then went through redesigns again when the child playtesters found his second attack confusing, because instead of throwing a cobra that acts like a turret like he does in the game, he would instead lunge backwards, which they didn't really understand. They also found his main attack creepy because instead of shooting venom, he shot snakes, the kid saying that he was quote-unquote shooting his children. He also surprisingly has ties to one of the many scrap Skylanders, one of his upgrades being inspired by an attack that was originally Breeze Wings, a cancelled core Skylander that dates all the way back to Spyro's adventures. Now that I look at his development history, he's probably one of the Skylanders who deviated from his original design the most. But with that out the way, let's get into his backstory. Many people said that Rattlesnake was one of the best trackers in all of Skylands, and others said that he was so good at shooting that he could hit a gold coin at 1,000 different places. But he wouldn't become a legend until he was trapped by a gang known as the Black Hats. The Black Hat Gang were a group of cowboys who were literal cows, and they threatened to plunder the local villages if the snake didn't lead them to the inside of Mount Cloudbreak, where the group were hoping to find enchanted treasure. Badly outnumbered and knowing that he couldn't take the gang of cows to the magical volcano, Rattleshake would go on to summon literally every snake in the area, and with his forces he overtook the Black Hat Gang and sent them packing. The tale eventually reaching Eon, who would invite the Serpent into the Skylanders, Rattleshake gladly taking that offer and becoming a member of the SWAT force. Now, there's a few things that I want to talk about in this story, and the first thing that I want to bring up is that I don't exactly know why Rattleshake is a Skylander of the Undead element. It might have something to do with the fact that he shoots poison, but even still, I don't think that poison-based attacks are exclusive to the Undead element, which makes me think that he was made in the late stage of the creation of the SWAT Force figures. I know it sounds strange, but think about it. If he was one of the first to be created, or heck, even somewhere in between development, the designers may have been able to switch him around to a different element since a Rattlesnake Cowboy kinda has barely anything to do with the Undead. His creators would have just had to do the best with what they had, which is what I think happened. Rattlesnake also highlights a lot of the aspects of the creative process as well, and it kinda shows what it's like to create something. You aren't going to get the exact image that you had in your head. Sometimes you're gonna want to try new things, concepts, even ideas with the character or such. Hell, I can even elaborate on this a bit as well. Stitchcraft was drawn for a completely different project of mine, but instead she became a custom Skylander. But with that out the way, I think it's about time that we get on to the next Skylander of today.
Crash and burn!
When it comes to Skylanders, Frino is kind of one of those weird ones because he actually uses a vehicle. In fact, he actually doesn't even use a vehicle that has a Rift engine. And to make things even stranger, he isn't even a part of the Superchargers. He's actually a core Skylander that was first introduced 2 years before in Skylanders SWAT Force, so let's do a bit more digging and see why that's the case. According to what I found, it doesn't explain why he has a motorcycle, but apparently he had a lot of design tweaks, as he was supposed to be much bigger than he was in game and have 2 horns instead of 1. And apparently other alternate concept arts had him holding a pickaxe, pliers, and even a flamethrower, sometimes paired with the pickaxe or the pliers, and it doesn't even mention if his motorcycle was even involved either, so he could have possibly been one of the most complicated Skylanders of all time. So with that out the way, let's take a look at his backstory and figure out what's going on in universe. Before Frino even thought about becoming a Skylander, he used to be a member of the Blazing Biker Brigade, who were a group of bikers who traveled around Skylands together, which Frino had barely any problems with, as he loved his life of freedom and adventure. But little did he know that his group had more sinister intentions. The bikers were actually a group of criminals responsible for a multitude of burglaries and thefts around Skylands, and when Frino figured this out, he was furious. He was a person who was big on honesty and hated liars and cheats, so he decided to control himself and demanded that the gang return the items and make amends. The gang obviously told him that they weren't going to return the items, and the fight that ensued ended with Frino's victory. But because of that, Frino now had a pretty big problem on his hands. He now had all these stolen goods and items that he didn't need or want in the slightest, so he decided that he would go around Skylands and return the items to their rightful owners, which is exactly what he did. He would go across Skylands on his motorcycle from one place to the next, returning the stolen valuables to their rightful owners until he eventually bumped into Master Eon on his travels. And after telling the Portal Master about his tales, Eon was impressed by his fighting ability and his good character. And because of this, he would invite Frino into the Skylanders, an offer that he would take, Frino going on to feud the Skylanders as his new crew. Now, the biggest question that I have to ask about this story is why Frino and his former group used motorcycles instead of something else. When it comes to Skylands as a whole, vehicles like cars and motorcycles don't really work because the islands are not only really small most of the time, but there's literally no reason to have one. I think this is one of the other reasons why the Superchargers were not taken as well by the rest of the community. As much as I hate to admit it, the sky vehicles and some of the water vehicles are the only ones that really make sense in the setting. Another thing I've wondered is why did it take Frino so long to realize that he was roaming around with a bunch of thieves? It would be one thing if he realized this after a few robberies, but they were able to steal so much stuff that Frino literally had to go on a whole journey to give all of it back. And speaking of the bikers, what did Frino do to them? It's never said if he sent them packing or if he just outright killed the entire group, and I'm starting to believe the latter because it's never said if they fled or not. But with that out the way, let's get into the last Skylander of today.
No chain, no gain!
Now, when it comes to the other two Skylanders that I talked about today, they aren't actually criminals, but they were just associated with crime. But when it comes to Ghost Roaster, he is the crime. Ghost Roaster has not only killed multiple different people, innocent ones at that, but he also doesn't really deserve to be a Skylander. And I know that sounds harsh, but let me just show you why I believe that. Before Ghost Roaster became a ghost, he was your average chef named Olaf, who lived in a village in the mountains, and according to many, he made the best sheep wool stew in all of Skylands. But one day, while he was searching for sheep, he slipped down the mountainside and into a valley below. After his tumble, he was mostly fine. Yes, he bruised his butt on the way down, but he was dealing with bigger problems as he was now trapped in an undead valley. And not only that, he was completely famished, so he had to do some drastic things just to survive. He would stumble across an undead town full of ghosts, or puffy white spooks as the wiki calls them, and instead of conversing with the ghosts to see if they had anything to eat, Ghost Roaster would just eat them alive with no questions asked. This absolute war crime of an act would catch the attention of the ethereal ruler of the village, and likely being the last one left, he would punish Olaf by chaining him to a rattling spiked ball, which would serve as a warning to other wandering spirits if he got close. For some unknown reason, Eon would take pity on Ghost Roaster and saw him as a useful asset to the Skylanders, so Eon would go on and offer Ghost Roaster a spot on the group, him joining the team and going on to become an important character in the Secret Agent's Secret comic book. And if you want to see what happens in that, go check out my video on Boomer. Now, when it comes to that comic book, he was pretty much right in it and didn't even know it. He was only brought into the Skylanders because Eon felt bad and needed an asset, which is kinda screwed up. But speaking of screwed up things, why would Olaf go out of his way to eat ghosts? Most living creatures at the time of Spyro's adventure were terrified of anybody of the undead element, So I'm kinda surprised that Olaf decided to go out of his way to eat undead creatures, which also raised the question of what he was prior to all of this. It's never said what he was beforehand, and the only thing I could really rely on is his skull, but whatever he is must have the most cursed anatomy I have ever seen in my life. Why are his teeth protruding outwards at an angle? I don't think teeth are supposed to do that, even for animals, but to be honest, it might have something to do with whatever transformation he went under. But with that out the way, thank you for watching this video. Like always, hit the subscribe button if you enjoy content like this, share this around so I can grow as a channel, leave some comments down below to make the algorithm happy, and I will see you all in the next one.